Welcome into Around the Felt. I got my co-host Colin here. I got Lino here, Cowboys super fan. We're going to be talking about, oh, there we go. He's got some, is that Dez or is that CD? Who do you got there?
That's CD right there. Come on.
CD right there. Let's go.
That's
so we're going to be talking about the Cowboys season. We're going to be giving them a grade on the whole 2024 season. Then we're going to kind of, talk about where they can go in 2025 and free agency and the draft. Really, take a deep dive into it and then get into some questions later on from some fans. But yeah, Lino, we'll let you have the floor first as the Cowboys fan. What did you ultimately give them as a grade?
So for the grade for this year, I got to give them a D.
Oh,
very, very disappointing year. But I didn't give them an F because I'd like to go into the injuries. A lot of key players were injured this year. At one point, we had 16 guys on IR, or not on IR, but just injured in general. Dak Prescott, D-Law, Zach Martin, Micah, Diggs, Sam Williams, DeMarvin Overshown, the list goes on. And a lot of those guys do make a lot of, key plays on the team. 7-10, 2-7 at home. I don't know what happened ever since that Packers game last year in the playoffs. Yeah. We're atrocious at home now. So just a very disappointing year, but I do think we'll be able to bounce back with some signings and hopefully we draft well.
Yeah, dude, when you look at the Cowboys, you hit the nail on the head. You just named every one of their star players besides CeeDee Lamb. That was out, And, offensively, Cooper Rush kind of kept the ship afloat a little bit. They were 17th ranked total offense, 11th passing offense. Part of that might have been they couldn't run the ball for shit. Also, defensively, they couldn't stop the run for shit. I think their biggest problem was they were just weak along the line of scrimmage this year. You could tell they lost Tyron Smith. They lost some pieces and then Zach Martin gets hurt. And it's those veteran leaders that you've had for the last decade are no longer on that line. And yeah, Tyler Smith is great, but you didn't have the same depth that you've had in years past. Losing D-Law, who is one of the best run-stopping defensive ends in the league. Clearly that hurts. Micah Parsons out for a significant stretch. That hurts. The defense was terrible. I think part of it was the injuries. Part of it was also losing Dan Quinn. And it's just his effect on that defense because you see what he did to turn around the Commanders' defense. Your boy, DeMarvin Overshown, you've been saying it since they drafted him, dude. That was your guy. I think a big positive for them until he got hurt was how he looked for this defense and how he's kind of going to be that guy in the middle of the defense going forward. Dak only played 8 games. Hard to really bash him a ton. But he did have 11 touchdowns and 8 picks, and that's not the Dak Prescott we saw in 2023. So I don't know what happened there. And you also mentioned the home, what happened? They went undefeated at home in the regular season in 2023, and they just lost that home field advantage. I don't know. Little weird. Ultimately, I gave him a C-. I think I'm being a little optimistic due to all those injuries that you highlighted. It's hard to really bash them. They won 7 games, They could have won 4 with the injuries that they had, and everyone was already bashing them for the holes in their team and how Jerry Jones didn't do shit last offseason to address any of those holes. Kind of left McCarthy out to dry, I'd say. And now, Brian Schottenheimer is the head coach. How is this team going to look out without Mike McCarthy? I don't know. I think, honestly, in hindsight, probably should give him the keys to Dan Quinn last offseason if they knew McCarthy was going to be out. But ultimately, a C- for me for the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I guess I'm the most bullish out of all of us, but I gave him a C+. And because there's a couple factors here. Because I, coming into the year, I didn't have the highest of expectations. Everything kind of pointed to a retool type year where it's look, this team's obviously not where they need to be to compete for a Super Bowl. It's kind of a take a step back year. At the running back position, they didn't really go out and address anything. Rico Dowdle obviously, really came along into his own. So that was a nice find there. But just so many injuries on the offensive side, so many injuries on the defensive side. And, while you highlighted Prescott maybe didn't have the best year to start it, he still was coming off of arguably an MVP season the year prior. So, you got to give him a pass there. And, Cooper Rush, I guess, is just give him whatever contract he wants, not money-wise, but however many years. Just sign that guy for the Dallas backup till he wants to retire. I just can't imagine him leaving. He just screams Dallas. And when you're missing Micah, Bland obviously had such a huge breakout season last year.
Yeah.
So many different injuries. And also, look, they went 7-10 this year, but that Bengals game, if you don't have that bullshit that happens there, that's a win there. And then it's like, all right, is this team, still fighting? Can they sneak in the playoffs? I ultimately think, there was a good chance they could have gotten that 7 spot from Green Bay if that Bengals game goes differently, because then they go and kick the shit out of the Panthers. They go and beat the Bucs. And it's like, yeah, it comes down to the Eagles and Commanders, but they were already eliminated at that point. So, if those 3 games go differently, we might be looking at a playoff team. I don't know. So ultimately, I gave him a C+ just because there was a lot of factors that went into it based off of my expectations coming in. I think this team will be significantly better next year. I think they actually may be better than Washington next year. And if there's between them and Washington, what team I think has a better chance to overthrow the Eagles? I'm going with Dallas because I think they're more of a complete team. It's the biggest question mark is the head coach. What does he do? I mean, this is a guy that's bounced around a ton. His dad obviously had a ton of success in the league, even though he never got it done, notorious choker. Hopefully he doesn't take after that, because that's a team that cannot use choker of a head coach again.
Like Mike McCarthy.
Yeah, and just what their past 25 years has been. But like Schottenheimer's dad is like known as like the number 1 choker all time of just great regular seasons and then just choking in the playoffs.
It's fresh blood, man. It's good. Anything is better than Jason Garrett, Coach Clapp, and then Mike McCarthy. I mean, I don't know why you get rid of a guy that had 36 wins 3 years before that, back 12 win seasons. But hey, fresh squad. Got some guys from college, signed some people around the league. I'm excited to see what they're going to do. I think the draft is going to be ultimately something that's going to really determine where this team goes in the future. But yeah, let's see with all those injuries and who gets re-signed.
Yeah, before we dive into the offseason, Lino, I know you were never a big Mike McCarthy guy.
It's not.
You were like, you know what? It's like he wins games, but you're always like, I don't think he's the guy that'll get us over the hump. And clearly, you were right. McCarthy's now out of a job. What were your thoughts on how Jerry Jones handled that whole thing where, they were talking for like a week, missed out on some interview windows and some potential other candidates? Like, I don't know. Do you think Jerry Jones hiring Schottenheimer was kind of a panic move, or do you think he always thought, I have Schottenheimer in my back pocket and I think he's going to be the next guy?
I think he probably went into some intentions with Mike McCarthy where he was thinking that, they would have a conversation and would go the right way, and maybe they give him one more shot or sign him back for one more season. Ultimately, I think that McCarthy probably brought some things to the table because everyone knows Jerry Jones likes to be a dictator around, and being a GM and being the owner, it just doesn't seem right to me.
He bought a hobby, Lino. He bought a hobby. Yeah. That's what it is.
I would say ultimately, like, that guy needs to, take a seat back and let some people take over. But in terms of the Schottenheimer signing, at first I thought it was a panic move. But the more I think about it, it might just be something where you got a guy that's been around a lot of football for a lot of years. He's getting a new opportunity. He's going to be hungry to want to be a good head coach in the league. And ultimately, some of the guys that he surrounded him around are either knowledgeable or fresh guys that are coming out of college as well. So I think just having a new team around there and also playing into the part that it was someone that was already in-house. Jerry kind of knows how he's going to operate. And ultimately, he's still going to probably pull some strings to dictate how he wants everything to go around the team. But I think ultimately him and Mike McCarthy just didn't see eye to eye.
I would agree with that sentiment. Now, did you want Coach Prime to take the lead role here? Or?
So I looked into it a little bit, and I was really big on going after Dion and going after Shador and trading Dak away for some assets.
Oh, now that would have been a crazy scenario.
I was okay with restarting, quite literally. I think Shador Sanders is a stud. I think he's great in the pocket. I think his arm talent is very, very talented. In a class where there's not many good quarterbacks, I'd say, in my opinion, compared to the last recent classes, I could have seen Dak maybe getting traded, eating like $105 million in dead cap. Kind of hurts though, so I don't know how that would have worked out. But I think you just rock with Dak, like Regan just said before. He had an MVP runner-up season last year, so maybe give him another shot. I think you got to go get some running backs. You got to go get a receiver, and then let him go at it again.
Yeah, I'd be curious what do you want them to do during the draft this year? Like, where do you want them to go with their first pick? Because I believe that they pick at 12.
12.
Yeah, 12. I know Ashton Genty is the popular pick there. And before we get to the draft, the Cowboys are $2.8 million over the cap. So they're going to have to make some moves. That Prescott contract, either that CD contract, not cheap. You got to pay Parsons at some point.
Yeah.
Some free agents that they have. Rico Dowdle, I could see he's probably gone. I don't think they're going to pay him.
Give him the bag.
I think
Zach Martin, that's a guy who, if he wants to continue playing, is certainly going to be back in Dallas in some capacity. Brandon Cooks, I think his time is probably done in Dallas. I think he's going to move on. Osa Digizua, I could see him moving on as well. DeMarcus Lawrence, Eric Hendricks, Jordan Lewis, a lot of pieces there, and they're over the cap. So they're going to need to hit on some draft picks for sure. With the 12th pick, running back, Ashton Genty, the most popular mock draft pick there. Is that a route you think they could go, or do you want them to go that route?
I think with how deep this running back class is, while I think Ashton Genty is very good, maybe generational talent. I mean, if you look at him in college, he was insane. But I think the style of running that he has kind of reminds me of like a Zeke type player where he's going to pound and has a lot of miles. I don't know if I'd go that route in the first round. I think that there's so many running backs, Caleb Johnson, Marion Hampton. You have a huge list of at least 10 guys that could step in and easily give you great production. I think you go receiver at 12.
I agree. I
Burden.
think receiver at 12.
Luther Burden.
And was
yeah, and then somehow if Tet falls to 12, I think that's a run the card.
That's not happening. Let's not.
It could, dude. It could.
That will not happen, bro.
It could. Hey.
But who do you rather have? Everyone's saying Tet is the best receiver in the class, but I'm looking at it from an aspect of like pairing CD up with someone. I think Luther Burden is explosive. I think it's a great guy to pair with him.
I mean, if you have your option at the 2, I think you have to go Tet just because Burden obviously plays more in the slot and CD's been a beast in the slot. So I think that adds a different dynamic. I don't know. I would be shocked if Tet falls that far. Honestly, I wouldn't hate the thought if you think you can trade back and Burden kind of falls. Because, let's not forget, like the Cowboys got CD because he fell. Like I don't think they had any intentions of drafting him and him being there. And he kind of just fell into their lap. So they could always trade back, get some more assets, and then, take Burden, in the 20 range for all we know. I mean, that's a guy who I think is very talented, but had a down year at Missouri this year for what his expectations were. Because I know you, Colin, you were saying, like, I think this guy is going to be, like, top 5 next year. And, I was all bought in as well. And, just all it takes is for an off year and, a lot of hype in NCAA 25. And, now your draft stock's falling a little bit.
Yeah.
So
his quarterback play was terrible. He was, he was supposed – his junior year was ridiculous, right? And he's an insane downfield threat. The offense sucked. The team sucked. His quarterback sucked. And, the production wasn't there. But I think Burden in the teens, I would think you could certainly take him at 12. I think Emeka Buka could be in play there. I agree with you. Like, Ashton Genty is a sexy pick at 12. But the strength of this draft class is running back, it's tight end, and it's defensive line. There's so many good backs. You can get one on day 2 and get really good production and fill some other hole. Because I agree with you. They need more help around CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. It just seemed like the ball was going to CeeDee Lamb all the time, and everyone knew it.
Yep, pretty much. He was getting double teamed so much throughout the season.
Yeah, I like Tolbert, though. He had a good year. I feel like he's a nice number 3. He ended up having like 7 or 8 touchdowns. I mean, he was a big factor in the red zone. But obviously, I'd say he's a number 3 at best.
Yeah, and I think it's one piece away from having it kind of like, Dak's always been used to Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup. Now that all those pieces are gone, it's really just CD. Jake Ferguson's a great option. I think he's someone that's slept on, but he did get injured last year, so it's something to keep in mind. You get a receiver at the 12th pick that can step in right away and give you some production, and in the second round, you go get any of those running backs. Maybe Hampton's there, maybe Henderson, maybe Judkins. And you're talking about now you got 2 weapons that just legitimately entered into the offense. You get your guys back that are healthy on the O-line. Tyler Guyton's coming across. Tyler Guyton. I think that's his first name. He's coming back. He's a little work in process, but I think he's actually looking, pretty decent last year. Tyler Smith's a stud. I think Zach Martin gives it one more shot. I don't think he goes out like that. Cooper Beebe was a solid center. And then right tackle, you got Terrence Steele. So you have a solid offense in play. It's really just can those guys step in right away and give you that production.
Yeah, and you're hoping the defense. Ollie Gordon would be nice to.
That's what I want. That's what I want.
I think honestly, if I'm the Cowboys, I'm like, Tech McMillan, slide to 12. Let me get some Travion Henderson in round 2, and that offense has got some fucking talent.
Now you're looking at it, and it's a whole different picture from this year. So I'm optimistic that we're going to have a great year. I think we win at least 10 games next year.
And then on the defensive side, it's like, obviously they have some holes they got to fill. Hopefully you get DeMarcus Lawrence back, but Trayvon, Deron Blands, are they going to be able to keep both with the money? Like, I don't know, because you got to pay Parsons. Like, there's definitely. That's why I also don't hate the idea that you mentioned, Reagan, of potentially moving back if you can to get some more draft capital, just to get some more dart throws on the board to try to get some more impact players on defense. Because you just hit DeMarion Overshown in round 3, I believe he was picked. You've shown that you can hit on some guys down the board, right? So I wouldn't hate that idea as well.
Well, especially if there's a couple like key players that start to slide, and you're like, one of these teams that are picking later so much more desperate for that true number one to come up and get, Burden, or if in this scenario Ted McMillan falls, I mean, there's going to be people that are like going to pay a premium to go get a number one wide receiver for their team, which you guys obviously already have.
Or even if Genty's at 12, maybe you trade that pick for someone that might want him, and then some capital for that. Yeah,
dude. I don't know. Ashley Genty, though, would be a lot of fun. It's like it's just something about the Cowboys and always having a stud running back,
DeMarco Murray, Zeke. They made McFadden a 1,000-yard rusher. Even Rico was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. So, I mean, it fits the mold, but I just think there's way too many running backs in this class for you to go in that option with Genty.
Give Deuce Vaughn a chance.
No, dude, come on. That was just a pity pick.
Guy seems like he could take 300 carries and be good.
That literally was a pity pick. And it's going to be tough for them to really address a lot of holes in free agency given their cap space. They're going to have to really maneuver around and, maybe look at what they just did in Philadelphia and Howie Roseman and how he figured it out. I don't know if Jerry Jones is smart enough, though, because he just didn't do anything last offseason.
Seems to be losing it. I could also see them restructuring some contracts. Historically, people like Zach Martin have done it. I know Dak would be willing to do it if he's coming off an injury. D-Law is someone I think he gets signed back for a cheap deal. He was injured all year. He can't really have much to prove for himself. And, he's been a lifelong Dallas guy. I think he'll end his career in Dallas. I think Zach Martin comes back, doesn't retire. And then we still got guys that are, relatively young that were DeMarvion Overshown. He's hurt. Sam Williams was also a really key piece for us that was going to be in that rotation at the end. He's another guy that was out. So even with the pieces that we have on the team that are signed, I think we'd be fine. And then it's getting that depth in the draft. So really hitting in those first 4 rounds.
Yeah, I guarantee this Micah Parsons extension, when it hits, it's going to be very backloaded because they can lower his cap for this upcoming season, jacking it way down and just pushing money back. And, Parsons is going to be around for a long time. He's a stud. You're not concerned about him being injured long-term or really anything, right? You can backload a contract like that. So I think that'll give them some more wiggle room. Dak will probably restructure, they'll have some money to play with.
I think so too. I have seen one thing, and I wanted to ask you guys' thought on this, but I keep seeing some mock drafts talking about a blockbuster trade at 12 to Cleveland for a guy named Myles Garrett.
Now, dude.
I don't know how that would work, but I have seen a mock draft saying Myles Garrett to Dallas, you trade that pick away.
So they're going to trade. Well, one, I do not want to see Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett in the same defensive line. No goddamn way. That should not happen in the NFCs. 2, you got to pay Parsons. If you're trading for Garrett, you got to extend him. I mean, that's a lot of money on that D-line.
Hey, maybe we pull the Niners and we just blow the team up, stack it up for 1 year and go all in. But Jerry Jones won't do that. So
at some point, he's got it, dude. Guy's getting up there in age.
Yeah, I mean, one last ride before he hits the retirement home. One last ride.
All right, let's get Drock in here. We got any questions, Drock?
What up, boys? Lino, what's good, my boy?
What's up, Drock?
What's good, my boy? Yeah, one question tonight. It's Drock's question. ChatGPT. Despite a strong start, the Cowboys suffered that 5-game losing streak mid-season. Now, was this the collapse due to coaching, player performance, or front office mismanagement?
I'll start off. I think going right in, front office mismanagement was definitely a big piece. Sitting there and not really addressing any of the positions and thinking that the people that you had in-house was going to be the solution just definitely wasn't it. The offense looked horrible this year. You get that first game, you beat up on Cleveland, everyone's riding high, but realistically speaking, the offense was very mid at best, even with Dak healthy and with the guys being there. So not an excuse for how they performed. And then on the defense side of the ball, just lack of depth from all the injuries and really just not going after the free agency and getting anyone. I think it was probably the most disappointing free agency I've seen in a long time.
I agree 100%. Jerry Jones set this team up for failure, where if they did get hurt at some key spots, they were fucked. And that's what happened. They didn't have the depth. They didn't have enough talent around those guys. I think the brand of the Dallas Cowboys got in their way a little bit. I don't know if that is a coaching thing or if that's a Jerry Jones thing as well, where there was almost too much outside noise. And, once it started to go downhill a little bit, it went downhill, right? And Cooper Rush did the best he could to right the ship, but it just wasn't there. Certainly injuries, monster factor as well for the disappointing season. But let's be honest, this team just won 12 games 3 years in a row prior to this 2024 season. This was a step back, but it would not shock me at all if they're right back in the thick of things on top of the NFC East next season.
I mean, they also had a ridiculously hard schedule this year. I don't think a lot of people realize that, but more of their games were against playoff teams versus non-playoff teams. I mean, outside of getting to play the Giants twice, and I guess the Saints and Browns, and the Saints waxed them, but still, I mean, most of their games were against tough teams. I mean, even the 49ers, who they played, and the Falcons, they played down years for those teams, but still early in the year. So overall, just tough season. It's going to be tough next year with all that money. I still think they're going to be a playoff team. I wouldn't be shocked at all if they win the division. I'm hoping, Dak really takes a step forward back to that 2023 form. He's definitely a sleeper for the MVP next year. Maybe I'll buy into that. I really like buying into these NFC East quarterbacks. It's fun to see my co-hosts get so flustered with it when they succeed. I don't know, man. I'm sure you guys will find one day. But this is a Cowboys pod, so yeah, Dave. Ultimately, there's a lot of fingers to point, but it might just be time to get Jerry the fuck out of there if they really want to win.
Yeah, dude. Jerry might be the curse on this franchise, honestly. There's one common denominator the last 25 years. It is that guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys. That wraps up our Dallas Cowboys 2024 season recap. We appreciate you tuning in. Lino, thank you for joining us, my friends.
Of course, fellas. My pleasure.